Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. I'm Matt Coleman. I'm one of the co-founders of Magnify World. We champion the innovation space, particularly around augmented reality and mixed reality and the future's use of the technology. It's come a long way in the last 5 years with massive $200 billion projections and market expertise coming out of the woodwork. And we've got a very special guest today from Toronto, Karen Vanderborght, who has a digital media background in immersive technologies. She's also working at the Ontario College of Arts and Design and works with many different projects. And she's got a keynote today that she'll be taking us through with some of her work. Good afternoon, Karen. How are you?
I'm very good. Thank you.
Great to have you here. And I've seen a bit of a preview of your presentation, and I'm sure the viewers are going to look very much forward to what you've got to say. We're going to be covering a number of different things in the immersive space, although one of my favourite subjects is immersive education. And I know you're going to be covering that. I know you're just saying before we jumped on the call that you've been inundated from colleges wanting your assistance, right? To how do they go online? How's that been for you before we get into it?
They're not requiring particularly my assistance. I think they are requiring the assistance of all of the faculty to adapt to the new courses or the new context of giving courses. And of course, in art courses, that can be tricky. I have the advantage that I'm teaching digital art classes, so I'm already accustomed to lots of new technology, and my mindset is always to try to innovate and to find new ways to present ideas and stories. But for a lot of other faculty that are, for example, teaching drawing or sculpture and that have more hands-on workshops, very physical and tactile courses, for them it's a real challenge. So we've been exchanging ideas throughout a 6 weeks course actually that OCAD offered to faculty, and where we also contribute during that course. So that's the first iteration of that one was done. And now we have a couple of follow-ups on accessibility, for example, and accommodation. So yes, they're trying to prepare us as best as possible.
Yeah. Well, it's certainly a changed world, and if you're not online with education now, I can't see a lot of universities not surviving, but they're going to be struggling, obviously, and some may not survive. But particularly in the arts area, because usually those classes are in person, right? They're not usually online. Probably 90% of them, I would say, or if not more. Would that be right?
Yes, I mean, a lot of universities do that have art classes do offer evening classes, and depending on the class, they do get filled up. I imagine a pottery class or textile classes and all that. I do know that they fill up. Once you get into more the technology classes, that depends on what is in at the moment. Web development classes or Adobe Creative Suite classes, which are more technical and step-by-step instructions, or coding classes even. So I've been in classes that were quite full, and in other classes that were struggling to have students. It really goes with its ups and downs. At this point, I think for a lot of universities, it's a financial strain because a lot of them are depending on international students, and that is very problematic at this point because they can't travel. Nobody can really travel at this point, and or very few countries. And it's difficult to get the budget. I'm not, of course, not in a position to manage those budgets, but I can imagine for them, for the income, it's going to be a very disappointing year, I think, for a lot of colleges and universities. And even in the national, the Canadian students are also probably thinking, would I am I supposed to pay the same amount for an online course? And then I'm not going to go into the debate because it's without an end, but is an online course as valuable as one in person? And what am I missing? And what are the the bonus points of each and what are the challenges and the minus points of each. I mean, they're not the same, right? That I can say. It's certainly not the same kind of course that you can offer.
Yeah, you're right. There was a debate last week around Harvard. They're charging $50,000 for students to do an online course a year. And the students, though, get to go and live in the dorms, but they get tested for COVID every 2 days, and they're not allowed to interact with the other students, which I thought was the, craziest thing. But I can't see the students not interacting with each other, right? But still, obviously, a premium, one of the most premium brands in the world for university. And let's, be interesting to see how that shakes out for them. But look, tell us, just before we get into this, I wanted to know a little bit about your European background, and just before we get into when you moved up to Canada and got into immersive media in the last 5-6 years.
Yes. So my background lies in, and we'll see it a little bit in the keynote that comes later, or I mentioned it there too. So my background lies in what at the time was called new media or transmedia or multimedia. That was in the 90s, at the time of video performances and installation pieces. And I worked for festivals and galleries. I also was very active in promoting my, let's call it colleagues, but I've always had my own arts practice as a side project, basically. So promoting work, and I even co-founded a cinema called Cinema Nova in Brussels. I was very much involved in that, where I did the live experimental underground presentations or program. I worked in mostly in Belgium, and I did a couple of gigs in Holland, and sometimes guest appearances in Germany and Holland, basically. Sometimes in France. So, and that was, there was also a lot of music involved at the time. I also had my own radio show, and I was DJing and VJing and all that. It was a lot of fun. So I did that for about 10 years, and then I thought I was ready to move on. I thought I had contributed enough, given a lot of time with little pay. Unfortunately, that's in the arts world very common, and decided to change and got into broadcast when I moved to Canada. I wanted to change my horizon, and thought by moving to another country that would be like an extra boost to change my career. So I got involved in broadcast media. About 8 years I did that. I did the motion design, and I also worked as a director of photography on a lot of youth series, because I don't know why I have a very good connection with youth. And but at some point it didn't challenge me enough, and then I got a little bit bored by it. Something happened. I got my contract was not renewed in a broadcasting station that I worked here in Toronto. They decided to cut the news. I'm not going to go into details about that, but they decided to cut the news programming, and at that time I was the director of a live multi-camera show and I had journalists working with me to make little documentary pieces, and we had a whole website and all that going. So in the end, I winded up in Toronto as a freelancer, and I got involved in a 360 video project the summer after that, and I haven't looked back. For me, it was bringing me back to my first passion, which was new technology and innovative storytelling and immersive experiences. And by doing that project, I realized that was where my true love resided. And since then, I've been able to carve out a little niche here, and I've been able to make ends meet, with its ups and downs. But I am very much still focused, and I'm continuing in it despite the ups and downs.
Fantastic. Now, I've had a look at a lot of your work. You've done some interesting projects, as I said, in immersive education, but also in AR and in other areas. Would you like to, I'm happy for you to start.
Yes, I'll do the whole share screen.
So it's interesting. I speak to a lot of people who have backgrounds as a media artist and design like yourself, and this immersive tech has really given everybody a new piece of life, really, with how they can showcase new experiences. So I shall leave it up to you.
Yes. So as we with the focus on education, I did focus this keynote also on making XR, so XR, VR, and AR inclusive, and as inclusive as it is immersive. Already from when it started in the beginning, the industry was, I already think, way more diverse than it is now. And now when there's big money involved, it starts to, again, go to the same kind of profiles. And then the more cheaper solutions is what the indie community and challenged communities wind up with, which is still, you can still do a lot with it, but unfortunately, money is again going through a specific direction, but I'll get on that later. So that's me looking to the future. So, oops, that was not my plan. So my background lies in media art, as we discussed before, and with VR and AR, I can kind of reconnect to that. But for me, story is very important, and also the part of the art and creative thinking and creative design. Those are things that I'm driven by. So I'm less focused on how can I make the biggest sales possible. I'm more into how can I make the most people have a great experience. And if a company can make sales by that, then that's great, and I'll go on. So first, in Europe, I did have a career as an experimental media artist. So I've shown my work in that was at the time very much single channel work in lots of film festivals. You see a little list there, and galleries and museums. And then in the background, you see images of my latest piece, a finished piece called Gray Matter AR, which uses snapshots, platform called Lens Studio to showcase the wisdom of elders through selfies. So it's actually flipping selfies into self-reflection. And you have sound bites of 10 seniors, 10 wise men and women, I call them, from very varied backgrounds. So I have the first black senator of Canada. I have an indigenous leader. I have a person from Indian descent that made his life, started his life from scratch again, as well as a Chinese immigrant. So many people from different backgrounds and social classes that talked with me about life and death, about family, about love, about work, career, money. So very basic themes that are the same. It doesn't matter in which technological era you live. These are basic human needs and wants and desires. So that's Gray Matter AR, and it's still on Snapchat. You can find it. It's called Gray Ma.
I just had a question, Karen, about that. Yes. Did you choose the Lens Studio over anything else for a particular reason?
Yeah, there were some reasons. Well, the main reason was that my public was there, so I wanted to reach to younger people and connect older generations with younger people, because I find a lot of people stay in a certain silo, a certain group of like-minded people, which is great, but sometimes to open up your mind and then as a consequence your opportunities, you sometimes need to break out of it and be challenged or listen. And So that was one of the reasons to have a cross intergenerational communication, or at least an intergenerational piece. And then also a very practical reason that Lens Studio has a very fast publishing policy and technology. So I don't need to wait a week before my it's called Lens, is live. For example, its competitor, Spark AR, which is Facebook basically, it will take sometimes a week and more before your effect, it's called there, will be online. So for me, very practically, I was like, I'm never going to be able to get them all finished. It will probably be right before the deadline. And as you can see, there's people standing there. So although it's an online art piece, I did create an exhibit in an art gallery here in Toronto called Trinity Square Video, where people could visit the gallery, the space, and use the Wi-Fi there, and have these snap codes on the wall, which are enlarged, and where you see the faces of the people that were involved, the elderly, more clearly, and you can just scan it with your phone, and then the experience will pop up on your phone, of course, inside Snapchat. So that's, of course, the limit of it. People need to have Snapchat downloaded, which is free, but, you know.
Sure. And I think that's important.
People have old phones.
It's important because, you know, well, most people do have Snapchat, let's face it. And if it was an independent app, you know, you'd have to have another icon on your phone, and you may only use it as a one-off.
Yes, so it was one of the considerations. I mean, it is a conflicting one in the way that when I talk to independent art organizations or artists, they're a bit like, why do you do this? And so not everybody is convinced of using social media as an art platform. And I understand the problems with it because of data privacy and such. But again, if I think about the average person, they don't really like to download a new app on their phone. Most people don't use that many apps on their phone. My phone is filled with apps, but that's because it's my job to discover new things, and I'm a very curious person, and I'm very playful, so I want to try new things. But most people will use a set of apps that they use daily. And a lot of people will, for example, play casual games for a couple of times and then they'll delete it. So I decided I would kind of piggyback on an existing platform. And that is a tactic that is not new. A long time ago, I also did what we call shop dropping, which means that you drop your art DVDs inside a shop without a price, so just drop them in there so people will find it. Because of one of the challenges with small budget art projects, of course, is the publication and distribution.
Yes.
So also with that, you have it's still tough to promote it, but at least it's out there and people might just stumble on it. And that's also one of the hopes that I have, that people just randomly find
Great.
it.
Well, that's a good case study. So thanks for sharing that.
Yes, thanks. So over the years, that started in Belgium and Brussels. So I've been curating. So curating, I've been selecting, contributing to art programs. So that's on 3 pillars. It's events. So I mentioned before my background in the arts community in Brussels. And then I still give workshops, and I deliberately put workshops separate. So sometimes it's very intense learning sessions that are outside of a college or university context. Sometimes they can be in a college where I'll, for example, show my work to students as a way to kind of show what's possible and how the real world works, or what you could do. I mean, on your own or with a team. So some of them are really workshops where we create something in an afternoon or over a couple of days, and in the end we have a result. And sometimes they're just more passive, where people just more discuss and talk. So I try to use tools that are, because I work a lot with, let's call it socially challenged groups. So people with no, no big backers or whatnot. So I try to use tools that are accessible, that they can find, that they can use, or that they have access to. Some free tools, or sometimes, for example, in the context of with my students at the university gives them access to certain software. So I'll adapt my classes so that at least we use that software, and I don't oblige them to buy another license for something that is not available through the university. And then another important thing that we sometimes forget, now that we're all in an online environment, spaces, a lot of people have trouble, real estate is expensive, and a lot of people are sharing houses or live in small spaces. And certainly with VR and AR, you might need some space just to enjoy it, or even work with VR tools. I mean, I use VR tools to sketch 3D objects, or even sketch point. There's a couple of tools out there. And so you need space for that. But it's also a space to show work and to meet each other and exchange ideas and give those workshops. And in a lot of cities, space has become so valuable that there's not a lot of room left for space for the arts and for artists. So I think it's important as a city or a community or a village even to reserve those spaces and keep that in mind in your planning, or ask of developers to have those kind of spaces and subsidize them. They are invaluable, even if we can talk over Slack and Discord or whatnot, or Zoom calls. It is never the same as physically being together with somebody. It's just human nature. We're just, we're not AIs. We are of flesh and bones, so we need that physical connection. And now, even with a mask, you can appreciate being in the same room with somebody 2 meters distance is still another experience than what we're doing now over a Zoom call, right? Which is great because we can talk and we're not in the same space, which is fantastic. Yeah. But it is not the same as being together, drinking a coffee and discussing. So spaces. So those are like 3 pillars, I think, that I've been involved with, but are in general important to create a community and to actually propagate VR and AR technology and possibilities. I also give workshops to business clients. So for example, I've trained teams, producers that I worked with before when I worked in broadcast, and they knew I was working in VR, and they called me in to train their team and getting them some crash course in VR and 360 video, and even I know a little bit of coding, so I can talk with the people doing the production to the people coding and the sound design, so I can give them an overview of the production process.
Excellent.
The workflow. So that's it for this, I guess. So teacher mentors are the last thing about the training. We can make a bridge with this. So on the left is one of the organizations I am close with and I support. They are doing great work here in Toronto. At the moment, for example, they even give food to artists during COVID-19. But they're basically an indie game community that so the community supports each other with giving training. So, for example, sometimes people learn Blender all by themselves and they get very versed in it, and then they offer a workshop for other members and pass on the knowledge and the tricks that they've learned. And there's also, we have a Slack where people post job opportunities to each other, or festival calls. And they have events normally before COVID and after COVID will happen. So that will continue. So in the middle, you see a weird shot of me doing a presentation at Taipei Film Festival. I think it was in 2018. So I gave a lecture on in the VR festival. Well, it was a VR section in a festival. So I regularly get invited to speak, to host workshops, or to be a mentor or a member of the jury. It can be in hackathons, or sometimes I sit in a panel. Of course, these have all shut down at the moment, most of it this year. And then on the right, do you see myself speaking in the screen, or is it just the screen that you see? So OCA Digital Futures, that's where I teach now. So undergraduates mostly, and what I do with them is like really think about story worlds, as I call them, because I think VR and AR are very much linked to physical spaces and presence, which is not necessarily physical, but more mentally and emotionally. Humane design, I'll talk about that more in a minute, and meaningful interactions. And I call it my Shoshin attitude, is like I'm constantly trying to retrain and up my skills, and I love doing that. And I think when you're working in new technology and you claim yourself to be innovative, then it is something that comes with the territory to be continuously learning. So every week I keep a day for that, to just like tinker and learn new technology or software, or read at least. About reading I'm doing almost every day. So it's like a second nature. Here, so talking about, I call it humanist perspective. So trying to think about a common thread, I think a lot of it is about, being fair and have keep people in their dignity and share values that are human and that can expand individuals. Forgot the word, but to actually expand people's minds and make them feel good about themselves. That's a lot, but you can take little steps at a time. I don't always choose my clients, but even if it's for a more commercial project, I will try to stay authentic to my values, and I am not gonna trick users in bad behavior or a road that takes them to the dark path. So aesthetics and ethics are intertwined in my designing, and I try to keep them inclusive and diverse. So in easy example here is United Nations. I worked on two occasions with them. So first for the HUM data, that's a new data center of the UN in the Den Haag, and the other time was with IOM, which is the International Organization of Migration. And these are, of course, advocacy pieces. So VR in the beginning was very much used in that way. We all remember the 360 video documentaries that were made for the UN, which started all that. I was contacted with that in mind, but I did give it my own twist. I thought it did need a little bit more than that, than just put your camera somewhere. So next there is National Film Board of Canada, which is like a PBS, or like kind of a national broadcasting agency, but for independent filmmakers. So it's not a broadcast company. The National Film Board is very much known, I think, in all festivals for their interactive work. So I worked on I worked on Ocean School. I worked on a couple of other projects with them. Ocean School is immersive educational content on ocean science. So that project is still ongoing, I think, but I was just there in the prototyping phase, so where we were like modeling and banging our head against the wall multiple times. Is a peer setup. And we thought that it needed to be part of the Canadian curriculum. So that is a big challenge. It's easy to say that you're making educational learning experiences, but if you need to include it in a real curriculum, then it's way more challenging, and it's an interesting challenge. So, and also we looked very much at the reality of a lot of schools and education systems where they don't have VR headsets and fancy computers for each student. We've seen it now in the online context as well. Was it 30%? I think in Europe and North America, of students don't have access to a computer, to a decent laptop, so they are staying behind. So these are already things that we were thinking of when we were talking about like how we're going to do this with VR in the class with the funds that certain schools have, and certainly public schools. So Kinshasa Now was my first, that's on the right, that's my first ever 360 video VR project that I was involved with as a, let's say, co-director. And I've put the new word in there, FM360V. FMV is full motion video. It's this term for video games that use video.
Yeah.
There's some out of there, and some people play it. I play them. They're a bit of a niche thing, but I could say that one was that, but for 360 video. So we made an app and a website at a time that are non-existing anymore. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure where you were thrown in the street in Kinshasa. It was your first day that you were thrown out of the house and you needed to survive. So
wow, that's crazy. Hey Karen, we've got about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to make sure
so I'm gonna
get to your slides as well.
All right. So Never Grow Up and Nouvelle are new projects that I'm working on. Nouvelle is AR and Never Grow Up is VR, and they're in development. So I'm trying to find funding, and I'm writing a lot of applications for them. One is about rampant construction, Nouvelle, and Never Grow Up is actually about child abuse, but I want to make it playful. I'll leave it with that. And oops, I'm not going to go in here. So these are projects that I've worked on, we talked about. And I'm going to go to my, what I call accessibility boosters. It's 4 takeaways of 20 years of, I call artivism. So I think one is tools. So I mentioned it before, how expensive are things. Microsoft HoloLens is not for everybody. So it's already in its price point, it's going to be for businesses. But maybe there are other things out there that you can work with, or the Magic Leap, the whole Magic Leap environment. But there's open source versions. How can I use that? Is that more accurate for schools, for example, to get involved with that instead of Google experiments, for example? So outreach, we still are in our silos. So a lot of people, when they want to organize festivals and all, and there's a lot of like more and more talk about, well, we have to be more diverse and inclusive. But I understand that certain organizers are scratching in their hair and saying, but where do I find them? They do not exist. And then I say, they do exist. You just don't know where to look for them. So it's a good tactic to then start reaching out to organizations, just Google them, that are in contact with the, for example, Black game designers or whatnot, and find people there. And they'll find people for you. You don't need to start from zero, right? There's already people that there's a lot of organizations out there. So that's outreach. Sharing, it's something that I've always been doing. If somebody asks me to be on a panel or give a workshop, and honestly, most of the time, I'm not even paid for it, I still do it. I just want to be out there. I just want to show that a woman can do it. For a lot of women and girls, that is still a big thing. I mean, people came up to me, for example, in Asia or something, people are trying to find examples. I'm not saying I'm the greatest example ever, but I'm a small example. I am just there, out there, and I'm just sitting there in between maybe a panel of only men.
the one thing that you've got going outside of your experience as an art director in the AR/VR space is that Canada does help fund some of these immersive projects, right? And, you know, I think it's your project that you're part of, Dames with Games. I'm sure the ladies out there would like to know, you know, how to access that network. Is there a URL that you could point them to?
Yes, I mean, it's dmg.to, but I can open it in my browser. So we do talk, I'm talking about funding it there at the last square there.
Yeah.
So I'll go here. So this is my website, and then I'll go to I just want to finish first with this, that, you know, my goal really is to make people look like those people on the right of me. They're surprised and they're laughing. That's for me my best compensation. That's my reward as an experienced designer and creative director. That is what I want. So this is one organization, but I'm sure there's many out there. And I also gave a VR presentation, Altspace VR in Women in XR, and so I'm still discovering a lot of support groups for, you know, I also sometimes I'm discouraged and I sometimes need a little kick in the butt or some inspiring talk. So that's why I'm also connecting to these organizations, so you know that you're not alone, but you also can find collaborators there. That is also a continuous process, honestly, in my practice. And I also find a lot of people doing great things that I didn't think about, and that can again point me to code or technology that they're using that I haven't thought of. So I cannot, express enough how important it is to create a community around you. And certainly now in these COVID-19 times, I can imagine it's even harder and people feeling even more isolated. So you do need to put a little bit of effort in it. And
I think that's fantastic. Hey, Karen, look, it's been a pleasure to meet you today, and thank you very much for all your work with the presentation and also your career from Europe into Canada. And you're doing a lot of exciting projects on a local scale and international scale. So we wish you good luck with everything as well, and we shall keep in touch. And everybody, you saw her website there. It's tkaren.com for more information. And thank you very much. Any final words from you, Karen?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very honored, and I hope I gave some good pointers there, and maybe some people inspired. And people can always reach out to me to share their work and projects, and I'm always ready to expand my network and my mind. So please visit my website. I think there's in the back, you saw it shortly, but maybe we can post it somewhere. And I'm on LinkedIn.
Right. Well, you have a great rest of your day, and we shall talk to you soon.